The following is a special presentation of Tony Kurre Radio.
The UAB Director's Chair. It's called this show because we have the athletic director of the UAB Blazers, Blazer Nation, Mark Ingram, joins us every single week. We've been doing a lot of classic rock talk. Today we'll be doing our top 4 guitar players. We'll get into the rules and regs coming up in just a few minutes. But Mark, how you doing, brother? Everything good?
I'm great, man. How are you doing?
Good. How was your trip in Las Vegas? Came up a little short. That North Texas squad is a booger bear. They won 3 out of the 4 games this year. But how was your trip? Everything good? And congratulations on a fantastic year. I know a lot. I'll be honest with you. I'd rather have seen UAB go to the NIT and get a chance to go to Las Vegas and play in the final than actually make it to March Madness and play one game and get bounced. I'm not saying they would have done that, but I think the fact that you could stay out there and be on television for another couple of weeks, I thought was really good for the program and setting a record. Listen, when you go to the Gene Bartow years and all the years they used to go to the March Madness tournament, and the fact that they won more games this year than any other year is just an amazing accomplishment.
Yeah, I appreciate you saying that, and I agree with you. I'm, obviously very, very glad that Andy Kennedy is our coach, and he's been doing a great job. And we won 29 games, which sets a record for our program, which beats his own record from last year, which was 27 wins. Mm-hmm. So, he's done that back-to-back years. We played in 2 championships. Unfortunately, we lost them both this year, the conference tournament championship and then the NIT championship. But, you lose to Florida Atlantic in the conference championship. It goes to the NCAA Final Four, and frankly should have been in the championship. What an incredible shot that San Diego State made at the buzzer to beat them. But they, that's how close Florida Atlantic was. And then, North Texas has, I don't know if I should say unusual, but they just have this unusual ability to play defense better than, about anybody I've ever seen. I mean, they did it to the team before us. Wisconsin, they held Wisconsin without a field goal for the last 9 minutes of their game. They only scored, I think it was 14 points in the entire second half in their Final Four game of the NIT. And then I think they held us to like 2 field goals
and Mark,
in the last 10 minutes.
And Mark, I don't know if it's got to be coaching. The adjustments that coaching staff makes for them, because, just a couple of games ago, UAB's up 22-2 against the squad. And you're like, okay, What's the big deal? And at some point during the game, this shutdown defense, and it can't just be bad shooting on the other side. They're making adjustments. They may not get out of the chute as quick as they'd like, but if they do get out of the chute, it's going to be one of the most boring basketball games you'll ever watch. You mentioned Wisconsin. They had 47 points and 14 minutes left in the game and scored just another 8 points. I mean, it's crazy.
It was all free throws. And so, hats off to them. I say that to credit them. And I'm proud of our guys, proud of our team, proud of our coaches. And, hats off to North Texas for a great season, and Grant McCaslin, who's a terrific guy that I've gotten to know a little bit through the league and our league meetings, is now the head coach at Texas Tech, and I'm sure he'll go do a great job.
Hey, I did a show with Kip Kiefer a couple of days ago, the Kiefer and Kurre show, which you can also hear in our podcast. You can hear this show at least 5 times on the TKR app. Over 100,000 people have downloaded that app, and of course, on our Tony Kurre Radio podcast network, we're available on every major industry. We talked about sportsmanship, and it really came to light, and I wanted to get your thoughts on it real quick before we get into our guitar players. Women's basketball, it was seen by 10 million folks, the most watched women's basketball championship in history. Probably had a lot to play in the fact that it was on network television, which I think is great for women's sports. The Caitlin Carter situation, unbelievable player. I didn't like the way she reacted after they beat South Carolina. She kind of ran over to the stands. I don't know if she was mocking or dissing or what, but it didn't appear that she was celebrating so much with her teammates. And then the Angel Reese situation where on camera, right after the game, she's doing the John Cena thing with her hands, and then she's pointing to her finger right in Caitlin Carter's face. And a lot of people thought that was unsportsmanlike. She didn't back down in the post-game conference saying, listen, I've been called ghetto. I've been called I don't belong here. And for all the women out there that feel like they're being dissed, I'm speaking for them. What's your thoughts on that?
Well, I think that sportsmanship is important. And I think that I think we've lost that. This isn't about her specifically, but that would be lumped into it. I mean, we've lost a bit of that, and I think sportsmanship is critically important in our game. I think a matter of respect and respecting each other as people is important, and that's part of it. I think this is a bigger discussion, but we've gotten to a place where through social media you can just say whatever you want to say.
Yep.
And I don't think that's all right. I don't think that it's okay for some coward to call themselves big man 25 and then say whatever is on their mind because they had a bad day at work, and then they want to come home and then they want to write one of my student athletes because they missed a free throw and we lost a game.
Mm-hmm.
And they'll just call them things that your listeners cannot fathom what grown adults will say to each other and to say to kids. And that just extends out through everybody. And I think sportsmanship is important. I think our coaches and our staff and administrators, it's on us to, in those moments, to pull a kid aside and go, hey, next time, let me talk to you about what you just did. Do you realize what you just did? And hey, when you get asked about that, you're probably going to be asked about that in the post-game press conference. This is what you should say. I'll tell you this, during the Conference USA Championship tournament hours, well, we beat North Texas, as you know.
Mm-hmm.
They had the reigning player of the year, Tyler Perry. We had, for the previous year's reigning player of the year, in Jordan Walker. Well, Jordan Walker had a great game that night. I don't remember how many points he scored, but it was a bunch. He had a big night. And in the post-game press conference, they asked him about that and asked him, did you play tonight with a chip on your shoulder because you weren't the player of the year again, but they chose Tyler Perry? And he said, yeah, I mean, I felt like I certainly wanted to go out and prove, that I was the player that I believe that I am. But Tyler Perry is a great player, and I love playing against him because he's a great player, and I think we're a lot alike in a lot of ways.
That's great.
I thought he handled it really, really well. And afterwards, I said to him, hey, I want you to know they baited you there. He said, yeah, I know. And I said, but you handled it great.
Yeah.
I said, you handled it great because if you always compliment your opponent and then you go beat your opponent, then all you did was beat a person that you said was really good.
That's right.
So there's no downside to complimenting your opponent. The downside to talking bad about him, he or she is, disrespecting me and they this and so I that. Like, that just doesn't make you. What does that do? I guess it feels good in that moment, but then later you have to realize the repercussion of those comments. And so I just think it's on us to educate these young people about how to handle the media, how to respect your opponent. Even if you hate them, you still, they're your rival, and it's a basketball game.
But Mark, and I totally agree with you. But does that drama make me want to watch women's basketball more? Yeah, it does. I mean, I hate to say it. I mean, I call it the Richard Sherman effect. I mean, I remember after the Super Bowl how he went off, and I was like, I didn't even know who Richard Sherman was, but I know who he is now. And sometimes to mock, to get into it. It adds the drama. We love the train wreck, so it's fun to watch. And I'll mention this.
Well, that's television. You're talking about television now, though.
Yeah, well, true.
You're talking about TV ratings. I'm just talking about being respectful.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you because
you're not wrong.
Because I've seen I've seen the JJ Watts and the Sidney Crosbys, and I've seen the Kawhi Leonards. I've seen the guys who are superstars that don't need to do that. Now they may be trash talking on the basketball court, but I don't hear those things.
Oh yeah,
I was at Herd My
Larry
Park.
Bird was the biggest trash talker there ever was, right?
Yeah,
on the court.
Jordan was too. And I was at Herd My Park. I was at Herd My Park last week and saw these little leaguers. I guess they were 6, 7, 8-year-old little leaguers. And this kid went yard. And then between third and home, he's sidestepping. He's doing like the sway thing sideways and doing some type of hand gesture to the pitcher. And his dad came into the stand and wore his ass out. Grabbed him by the arm and said, we don't do that. And it ruined the whole moment for the kid. The kid had just won the game with a home run. He's like, that's not the way we act. We're not doing that. And I'd love to see that. All right. So we've done bass players. We've done frontmen. We've done vocalists. We've done drummers. Now we're doing probably the hardest thing, and that is rock's greatest guitar players. This is not a list that has not been done probably a million times before, but that's what makes this cool because
we're not the first ones to do this.
No, and I and I can guess that you're four. We may have a couple of the same, but I doubt it. I was going to say let's put Jim in there and then grab four other ones because I don't think anyone can debate that Jimi Hendrix is one of the greatest guitar players that we've ever seen, but you're allowed to pick any four you want. We always do honorable mentions first. Try not to make it too long because the show's only 30 minutes long, and then we'll get into your final four. But who are some of your honorable mentions for the greatest guitar players? And again, it's your rules. It can be classic rock guitarist. It can be anything you want, but who you got?
Yeah, I'll run through my honorable mentions for the sake of time, but without doing too much storytelling. My first one is one that you don't know. So I love when I can find one that somehow you don't know. So this guy, my first one is more of a studio musician. He, in my opinion, is maybe my favorite guitarist to ever watch play. And I've seen him live, and he's incredible. So you know the lead singer for the band Poison, Bret Michaels.
Uh-huh.
Well, Bret Michaels, after Poison broke up, he wrote a horrible movie called Letters from Death Row. That horrible movie had a soundtrack. I'm not sure that he didn't just write the movie so that he could write the soundtrack, but he had a soundtrack for this movie, and he has a studio guitarist named Joel Pace. Yeah. Now, Joel Pace is a phenomenal player who I've seen live, and this guy can shred. And he is playing guitar in Letters from Death Row for Bret Michaels, and is one of the all-time greats. Lives in Charlotte, North Carolina, and just is one of my favorite rock stars of all time.
Okay.
Yeah. See, I stumped you on that one. So you didn't have that one.
I did not have that one.
Okay, you'll have this one, I guarantee you. Joe Satriani.
Yeah.
Joe Satriani is really was never in a band per se. Wrote a lot of music. Did a lot of instrumental albums himself. Really clean, really beautiful guitar player from the West Coast. And he taught my next one how to play, which is Steve Vai. Joe Satriani taught Steve Vai how to play guitar. And Steve Vai, was with several bands, was with David Lee Roth after he left Van Halen on Yankee Rose. Steve Vai, one of the things that makes him so great is that he makes sounds with his guitar that are not traditional guitar playing sounds. Like he kind of makes it talk, which is really funny. He had his son was like 1 or 2 years old, and was just, whenever babies start to talk, made this funny sound into a microphone that sounds like gaggle gack, and he takes that sound and then he starts making his guitar make that sound, and he wrote a song called Gaggle Gack, which is after his baby's kind of not first word, but this sound it made, and I just think that's incredible. Another guy who's more of an instrumental guy, did a lot of instrumental music albums. A guy named Yngwie Malmsteen.
Oh yeah.
Yngwie in the 80s was a really fast player who could do things that a lot of people couldn't do, and not many people have heard of him. You got to really be a
We used to play. I worked for AOR stations, man. We used to play his music. Fantastic guitar player.
Yeah, it's terrific. I love Kirk Hammett from Metallica. I don't know if that fits into our category or not, but I like him because he's fast, and I like him because he really plays, I think, really technical music that found its way both into the metal scene and into the mainstream. So I think Kirk is a really impressive player. I think Slash from Guns N' Roses did an incredible job of not just playing great music, and he wrote a lot of great music, but he got better. His music later on in their later albums, and his ability to evolve as a player, I think, is really impressive. I've seen him live, and he's terrific. Another guy that I think all guitar players certainly know of is a guy named Jason Becker. Mm-hmm. Jason Becker from a band called Cacophony, which he was in when he was 16 years old. And Jason Becker, sadly, at the age of 19, got ALS, which is, I think, unusually early. And the man, thank God, is still alive. He's 53 years old, and that's got to be a medical miracle in and of itself. But he has continued to write and play music or compose music as he's lost the ability to play the guitar, but he's composed music even through electronic devices that he's been able to communicate with. But Jason Becker was a phenomenal player. How do you not have Eric Clapton, right? Eric Clapton is one of the most beautiful players of all time. Plays, both the acoustic and electric guitar just beautifully. Sits down at a concert on a stool and just goes to work for 2.5 hours and just blows your mind. Paul Gilbert played with Racer X and with Mr. Big, another great player who I really enjoyed playing. You'll like this next one. So I got the mad scientist of the group, which is Frank Zappa.
Oh yeah,
right. Frank Zappa was a wild guy, and in his era, just played in a way that most people didn't play, and he just tried a lot of different things that nobody else did. Like, he took a lot of risks, kind of took his wacky attitude and persona and made it part of his, really who he was and his style, and it came out in his music. Tony Iommi from Black Sabbath was maybe the first metal guy. That band was the first one in the metal category, but it was in that classic rock genre that I thought was really good. Brian May from Queen. Yep. You could take a couple of these bands like Queen, and you could, in all of our categories, go, yep, that guy should be on the list. Yep, that guy should be on the list. And Brian May, to me, is one of those guys who played really clean music. And the thing about the band, which he had so much to do with, is, they're like, all of their songs are very different. They don't really have a style,
That's right.
Which I think is what is really special about that band. Love Stevie Ray Vaughan. Love his blues style. Love that just sort of slide guitar type music that he played that was fantastic. A guy that doesn't get a lot of credit that I thought was a really great player is a guy named Nuno Bettencourt. Nuno Bettencourt was with the band Extreme, and also plays a lot of classical style music and also rock music. Really great player. Billy Gibbons from ZZ Top. Golly, I love ZZ Top. Man, they are so cool under that beard and those glasses. But he's a great guitar player, and he also had a real rock blues feel to him. Just got a couple more here. George Lynch from the band Dokken. George was a great player, and Dokken was a band that was a heavy metal band back in the 80s that not a ton of people knew, but man, he was fantastic. Warren DeMartini from the band Rat, another great player who I really enjoyed. And I loved Rat. I thought. And they only had a couple of hits, but man, but what they had was really big. Last two, which I guarantee are on your list, Ted Nugent. Yep. Ted Nugent was a great guitar player, and he's a great, wrote a lot of great music, and probably is, sort of fallen off in favor of a lot of people because all of his very vocal political views and things. He's almost like an activist for hunting and all that kind of thing. But put all that aside, the guy could really go to town on the guitar. And Keith Richards from the Rolling Stones, one of the all-time greats, just a legendary player. So that's my honorable mention list.
You only mentioned one in there that I got in my top four, so that's good. No,
good.
The first guy I brought on stage when I came to town was Bo Diddley. Amazing story. It was at the picture show down in on Highway 31, and I walked up and I said, "You want me to mention your label? You want me to mention what do you?" And he's like, "Nope." He said, "I don't even want you to say your name. Just get up there and say the word Diddley. Just say Diddley. That's all you got to do." And I was like, "What?" And he goes, "I don't want you to say who you are. I don't want you to mention anything. Just walk on stage and say Diddley." And I got up there and said Diddley, and the place went crazy. I don't know if it's a thing he's got or whatever, but he did that. B.B. King, obviously, huge. One of the greatest, and I had a hard time not putting him on my top four, but Vince Gill is just a beautiful voice, but his guitar playing is filthy, sick, good.
Really?
Yeah, and the fact that he plays with the Eagles. He is such a great guitar player. It's unbelievable. Mark Knopfler with Dire Straits, also a guy. And by the way, Mark Knopfler actually extended an invite to Vince Gill to join Dire Straits before they came out with Brothers in Arms, and Vince turned them down because he's like, what, I want to give this thing a shot on my own. He could have been part of Money for Nothing, the whole thing. The Edge from U2, I think, is a fantastic player, very distinct sound, very different. Prince, you got to put Prince in there. I know it's not a classic rock thing, but Prince was a hell of a guitar player. You mentioned Billy Gibbons. I got to mention him because he's on my radio station. Billy Gibbons is the man. He's on. David Gilmour, another guy I had a really hard time trying to decide whether he's going to be my Final Four just because of the distinct style of playing and I know a lot of it was processed. A lot of the early stuff was not, but go listen to Dark Side of the Moon. Just listen for the guitar parts. You'd be blown away. Yeah. Eddie Van Halen, you did not mention him, so I'm assuming that he's in your Final Four, but I'm not putting him in my Final Four because it's too damn easy to put him on there. I wanted to go a little off the board. Pete Townsend, another guy.
Great one.
I mean, he's probably destroyed more guitars than I'll ever own. Chuck Berry. Chuck Berry may have not been the greatest guitar player, but he did more with the guitar than a lot of players wish they'd done in their entire life. You mentioned Stevie Vai.
He sped music up. I mean, he changed a lot of. He went from that.
Go watch Back to the Future, brother. When Michael J. Fox is up there and a guy gets on the phone and goes, man, I'm hearing this guitar style I've never heard before. That's what Chuck Berry did.
So that new sound you're looking for?
Yeah. You mentioned Joe Satriani. Go listen to Surfing with the Alien and tell me how much you love that. Les Paul,
no doubt,
who I think was maybe not the greatest guitar player, but for God's sakes, he's got a guitar named after him, so he's got to do something. You mentioned Clapton. Lou Reed I thought was very interesting. George Thorogood, who again, he might miss notes, but he doesn't care. It's sloppy. It's great. And finally, a guy that I've had on my show numerous times, and I haven't had him on a couple of years, but Gary Hoey, who had a modest hit with Hocus Pocus's big hit. That guy can play the national anthem unlike any guy I've ever heard. It's fantastic. So those are my honorable mentions. All right, we've got about 10 minutes. Let's rip through them. Give me your first guitar player on your Mount Rushmore.
Jeff Beck from the Yardbirds.
There you go.
Jeff Beck, great player, and went on to do a lot of other things, but that's sort of where he got his start. And I think a lot of guitarists would look at Jeff Beck and say that he's sort of a guitar player's guitar player.
There you go. I'm going to go with SRV. I met Steve Ray Vaughan about 2 months before he died in the helicopter crash. I was not a big fan of his just because I had never heard his music. I know that after he died, we played about every song he ever came out with, and they stayed on our playlist. And I don't know why we had to wait till him to die to play his music, but his distinct style and really just a guitar. He was a super nice guy, and it's got the most beautiful autograph that I'll ever own. I still have it. It's just absolutely beautiful. But Steve Ray Vaughan would be one of my guys. Who's your second?
Well, we've talked about Jimi Hendrix. So I got Jimmy on there. I mean, here's a guy who played a right-handed guitar, left-handed, upside down, and during the time that he was playing, he was considered to be the best guitarist in music. And so, Jimi Hendrix.
And I didn't put Jimmy on there just because it was too easy. And again, I was trying to pick some different guys. Okay. Yeah, because I mean, everyone, and the fact that Jimmy died at the age of 27. I mean, just think about what he could have done with the guitar. I'm going to go with Joe Walsh. I'm going to go off the board here and go with Joe Walsh. Only because when you're a guitar player and you can bring your style into a band and change the way the band sounds. Before Joe Walsh joined the Eagles were a country band. I mean, Peaceful, Easy Feeling, Take It Easy. Just think about some of the songs they wrote. Yet he could still play, I Can't Tell You Why. And he could play some of the slower things. But I think Joe Walsh, and the thing is Joe was sitting around one day doing the beginning riff to Hotel California. And they were like, what is that? He's like, and he also did, Life in the Fast Lane. Glenn Frey driving down the interstate in California, doing blow off the steering wheel. And he was like, man, this is living life in the fast lane. And he thought back to Joe Walsh's guitar riff and said, let's write a song. And next thing you know, it became one of the biggest hits they ever had. But I'm going to go with Joe Walsh. Who else you got?
Well, I'm glad you picked Joe Walsh because he was one that, as I was trimming my list down, my honorable mention list, he was one of the ones that I sort of just left off for time's sake. Jimmy Page from Led Zeppelin, I think, was just an awesome player. And it's funny, I don't necessarily listen to a lot of Led Zeppelin music, but I think it's all great. And that's all driven by Jimmy Page.
There was this band called Rainbow. Do you remember? They had a song. They had a song called "Street of Dreams" that was a modest hit. They also had the #1 video. The first year MTV came out, it was voted as the #1 video on MTV. A song called "Can't Happen Here." I played on my radio station. People may not know what the song is, but it's a great song. And the guitarist on that record was a guitarist that everyone plays, because you have to start playing the guitar by going dun, 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 dun. That'd be Richie Blackmore from Deep Purple. If you get a chance to go back and listen to his early stuff, and then what he did to change the way album-oriented rock sounded as the way we know it, it's dark, it's moody, but it's so symphonically and orchestrally correct to what he's trying to persuade us to believe in the music. But Richie Blackmore, and Richie for years was known as one of the top guitarists until this guy Eddie Van Halen came along. And Richie's still alive, and he's one of those guys where he can reincarnate anything. If you got Richie Blackmore as your guitar player, you know the band's going to be successful. I'm going with Richie Blackmore. And who's your final guy?
Well, and I had Richie too. I'm glad you said him too. So I had him on my list, and I thought I was going to get you on that one. Yeah. No, I thought he was great too. Deep Purple was really, when I think about classic rock, I think about Deep Purple and Ted Nugent and people like that. That's not what we call classic rock today, but that's what I grew up with thinking of classic rock. And he was incredible. And then the all-time great, my all-time favorite is Eddie Van Halen. God rest his soul. Mm-hmm. I love the guy. I love the way he played. I love the band he was in. I love the music that they all played. I loved how fast he was, how creative he was, all the things that he did differently. And I just, there's not any song that I could listen to, and there's a lot of them that I wouldn't enjoy listening to right now that Eddie Van Halen played.
I would have to totally agree with you. And I didn't put him on the list again because I just thought it was too easy. I was trying to go a little off the list. He's in my Jimi Hendrix era. But my final guy is a guy I've seen play about 15 or 16 times. He averages 7 miles a night running across the stage every time he plays. And I want you to go listen to Ride On. And then I want you to listen to Riff Raff from Powerage right after it and go, how in the hell is this guy playing both those styles of guitar? A lot of people think it's 3-chord stuff. It's not. It's unbelievable. He doesn't consider himself a guitar soloist, but we know he is. But yeah, Angus Young is to me one of the greatest guitarists. He could do it backwards, upwards. He does the circle on the floor. He does the whole 9 yards. And if anything else, he's just super fun to watch. The guy's 70 years old.
Showman.
They're going to be playing a concert with Metallica, with Guns N' Roses, with Tool. It's called It's called Power Trip. Go to Power Trip. I think it's powertrip.live. And tickets are only $1,800. It's a 3-day event in Indio, California. It'll be the first time AC/DC's played live in 7 years. If I had the money and I was a self-absorbed rich man, I would go out there and spend the 3 days in a tent out there. And it's where Coachella.
How do they make it so affordable?
Because they know people are going to spend the money, man. You have to pay $599 just to register to get tickets for this show. But it'll be the first time AC/DC's played live since 2016, so I'm going with Angus. Hey, man, great show. We're up against it. Mark, thank you so much. What do you want to do next week for Mount Rushmore?
Well, you said you had some surprise for me. I don't know what it is.
I'll text you. I'll text you in a day or two, and I will have.
We're going to have to talk about the spring game. We'll download the spring game,
absolutely,
which we're playing later on. We've got the football spring game for the UAB Blazers and Trent Dilfer's first public appearance as our coach with his team on the field. So I'm excited about that. Excited to see that at the stadium.
Can't wait. Have yourself a great week, brother. Thank you, man.
Thanks, pal. Have a great week.
This has been a special presentation of Tony Curry Radio.